Hi, I'm Joe Harroz, president of the University of Oklahoma. I want to welcome you to our Conversations with the President. This platform gives me the chance to talk to some of the great people who make OU so special. Make sure you're subscribed to Conversations with the President, and you'll be the first to know when new episodes are released. Let's get started. First thing first, I want to thank Governor Kevin Stitt for making the time for us and joining us on the show for the last episode. If you haven't already, please listen to that episode or watch it on our YouTube channel. Governor Stitt and I discussed a range of topics, including workforce development within our state and the university's role in that development. At the University of Oklahoma, our purpose is to change lives. And last August, when I welcomed our record-breaking freshman class, I shared with them that I believe that it's important to leave your mark while you're at OU. I encourage them each to write their own story, to be who they want to be. And I offered to them that your time at OU is a time for you to learn not just what you want to do with the rest of your life, but to learn who you are. What is your legacy? What do you want to leave behind? Who are the people you want to most positively impact going forward? I think that wish is best exemplified with today's guest, who's been a pillar of the University of Oklahoma and its community since he arrived in 1967. All right, it is my profound pleasure to welcome our guest today for Conversations with the President. In life, you only have a few heroes, and today's guest is one of the profound heroes in my life. He is someone that everyone in the University of Oklahoma community that's been here for any length of time knows, and for those that don't, it's time that you get to know him. And I'd like to give a few sort of brief comments first about your background, and then would love to open it up for a conversation. But Dr. George Henderson came to the University of Oklahoma in 1967, so 56 years with us here. He has broken ground from the moment he came to OU, and his story is one of incredible influence and import. And when we talk about what the University of Oklahoma does in changing lives, Dr. Henderson personifies that. When he came to the University of Oklahoma, he was only the third black professor to be at the University of Oklahoma. He was the first to get an endowed chair. And he and his wife, Barbara, who are treasured members of this community, were the first black property owners in Norman, which is a tragic reality. Dr. Henderson, through all of this, has prospered and flourished and built us to where we are today, and lays a roadmap for where we want to go as a university and as a society. He founded the Department of Human Relations here at OU, which he chaired for 20 years, and eventually became the dean of the College of Liberal Studies from 1996 to the year 2000. The Henderson Scholars Program is a critical program here named in his honor, and there are so many things that don't carry his name but carry his legacy. George, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being here. And for our listeners that maybe haven't heard from you before, can you talk a little bit about your background and what brought you to Oklahoma?
My background? Oh, gosh. Born in poverty in Hurtsboro, Alabama. We lived in what I refer to as a dirt-poor environment. We lived in a wooden shack. My father's parents and my mother and I and my father, we lived in that place. I know poverty. I lived in poverty. My father was run out of Alabama by the Ku Klux Klan, and he moved from the segregation of the South to the segregation of the North. That's the long and the short of it, except for this item. I was on welfare until ninth grade in high school. And so, consequently, I lived in places where people shouldn't live, and I spent many, many days without an adequate diet or food. But I had a mother. My mother told me almost every day that I was with her that I love you. My father, not so much. My father wanted me to be a man. My mother wanted me to be a gentle soul. I tried my father's way. It didn't feel right. I then gravitated to my mother's way. And so consequently, with the help of a lot of teachers, I got out of special education with the help of Miss Johnson. She didn't believe that these special ed kids should be there. So she offered tutoring to all 35 of us if our parents agreed. My mother and 10 other parents agreed that we would do tutoring before school and after school.
And Dr. Henderson, this was your third grade teacher, right?
Yes, Miss Johnson. We were among the first kids to test out of special education in East Chicago, Indiana. In high school, I was on the track team, the star sprinter, running in yards instead of meters. That'll tell you how far back I was running. Of a class of 250, 36 were National Honor Society, and I was one of them. The first from East Chicago, the first of two of us from poverty. But hey, that's that. Got a track scholarship to Michigan State. In ROTC, loved it, except I didn't like the fact that we had this thing called a Korean conflict going on. Dropped out of ROTC, and my draft board said, greetings. My freshman year, there were 35, 40 blacks, most of us athletes, 4 black females, so you guess I didn't have a date. My sophomore year, 5 new ones. Barbara Beard was one of them. Gosh, we met at a place that was agreed upon in the basement of the student union, and I saw this lovely, slight female coming, and I rushed over to her and I says, "Baby, you know you love me." That's George Henderson's story. We got. I decided I wasn't going to leave her at Michigan State without marrying me, so we did. 1952, we started the Henderson clan.
And it's a remarkable story. You all got married, and so your journey went from being a family that the Ku Klux Klan was after. You became the first in your family to graduate high school.
High school, college, first everything.
First everything. And you meet Barbara. Then you went off to do your service for a few years.
Instead of the Army, I volunteered for the Air Force. I went to training to be a radio repair technician. I was the worst repair technician the Air Force has ever produced. I failed Morse code twice. The instructor called me and says, "George, if you promise never to use Morse code, I'll pass you." So I passed, and I wasn't a very good radio repairman, but that was the beginning of George understanding something about international cultures. We had an Arab. All of us had Arabs to clean our Quonset huts. French Morocco, City Slimane, and desert. Secret radio installation underground there, except the Arabs rode their camels over it, so what was secret about it? Anyhow, our Mohammed, and we called all of them Mohammed, didn't bother to ask their name. And we would mess up our tent after they did our clothes and floor and bed. And after one of those ventures, Mohammed was left to pick his clothes up. The other guys had gone, and he looked at me and he says, "George, I know why those other guys did me like this. Why did you? You, me, same. Wow." He was right.
It's powerful.
I was the only black in that unit. And before I got Mohammed, I was the object of ridicule and scorn. You, me, same. And then I said, never again, not on my watch, will you be treated badly. I do those things. Why? My mother told me to.
Yeah. It's interesting. You change cultures, and all of a sudden,
Yes.
you're the one imposing it and not the victim. But you learn from that, and that's amazing. Tell us how you came to become a professor at the University of Oklahoma in 1967.
Okay, 2 sides to this. I'm either insanity or my creator sent me here. I chose my creator sent me here. Insanity, if I was on the other side, I could make a good case of George being insane. Why would a father, a husband with 7 children and a mother-in-law take a $5,000 pay cut to come to the University of Oklahoma and teach when he was the 13th African American in the United States who got a doctorate in educational sociology? Could have gone anywhere. I can't explain it in any other way except that's just where I should be. I had the largest lecture interview than any professor ever coming. People from, every academic unit representative wanted to interview this guy. The reason, there was a race riot in 1967 in Detroit, and we lived 2 blocks from that riot. And I was assistant to the superintendent of the Detroit Public Schools and part in charge of community relations. And they wanted to hear about the school's reaction and my role, and et cetera. I wanted to talk about academics. They wanted to talk about the race riot.
Mm-hmm.
But why did I ask that I wanted 2 hours with students, free time? I don't know, but I did. And talking with the students, they showed me Norman. They showed me the poor people in Norman. They said, we say we don't have poor people here. And they took me to the places where the poor people live. Also, they said, we don't have much diversity here. Well, we didn't. One of them said, you know, Dr. Henderson, we need you because we don't have anyone to teach urban sociology, have never had. Your experience is great. You were a community organizer. You knew Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., et cetera, et cetera. Would you please come and teach us? I listened. And one of them said, look, let's be honest here. You're probably going to get better job offers in the university, but you won't get better students than us. Do you want to be a small fish in an ocean or a big fish in a little pond? I said, whoa, hey, I could be a whale. No, I accepted because of the students, that I made my mind up. I want to teach these students. It was my calling. That's why I'm here. It wasn't insanity. My Creator sent me here, and with the message, teach them well.
Well, it's amazing how these beginnings occur. Can you? This is interesting. It's February. It's Black History Month, and when we think about those icons in Oklahoma, and you spoke about one of them, Prentice Gaught, the first black scholarship athlete at the University of Oklahoma, played for Bud Wilkinson. There are other names of individuals, and you've mentioned outside of OU, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., but when you look at the names that make up the landscape of Oklahoma and OU, Melvin Tolson, Ada Lois, Scipio Fisher, Claire Looper, these were all friends
Sylvia
of yours.
Lewis.
Sylvia Lewis, absolutely.
Jimmy Stewart. I could go on. Who's who in black Oklahoma, Oklahoma City and Tulsa, became friends with the Hendersons.
Yeah.
They didn't have to, but they reached out. But Ada Lois called me aside after the first dinner we attended was in Oklahoma City with Ada Lois and Sylvia Lewis and Claire Looper and the others. And after the dinner, she pulled me aside. She says, we're glad you're here. You have a huge responsibility. You have to help finish what I started. I agreed. In driving home, I said, what if I fail? And a voice said, you've got to try.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So you arrived here in 1967. Some of these stories hadn't been told yet. Some were forming. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 had just been passed, not fully implemented by any stretch of the imagination. Mm-hmm. As you, could you sort of paint the picture for us of what you found in and around civil rights in Oklahoma at OU when you arrived here in 67?
I found what I saw in the North, which led me to the conclusion that you can run, but you can't hide. Joe Louis said that to Billy Conn in a fight. I could try to run from racism in housing and employment, et cetera, but I can't hide from it. What I found individuals many who didn't want a black living in their neighborhood, and so they moved out. I found others who welcomed me. I was a hypocrite before coming here. I taught desegregation, I taught integrating in housing, I taught all of the fine things about living with other people, but I lived in an all-black neighborhood until I moved to Norman. So I was telling others to do what George Henderson did not do. I taught the theories. I asked other people to live them. It was my moment of truth. So I found individuals who call me, oh gosh, you find a negative term for an African American. They call me those things. Good gracious, maybe I had trauma and people didn't tell me. But I found something else. all of the garbage on my front lawn and all of the eggs on my car and all of the people driving by my house shouting epithets and telling me I should go back to Africa, and all of the police officers stopping me and asking me why I was in the neighborhood, all of the negative things that could have happened happen. But there's always two sides to a story. The other side, I found people who said, we're glad you're here. Welcome. Let's try to make this thing work. Don't you leave. We weren't, I wanted to leave. I'll be very honest. I was ready to go. I said, Barb, we tried it, didn't work. She said, whoa. I packed up our household because you were trying to help the riot situation. I moved all of our kids in here and I settled in. She says, I'm not leaving. We will leave when we're ready, not when other people say we should, not a moment earlier or a moment later. I said, okay, boss.
Well, as I've often said, thank you, Barbara. And as you think about it, it's been 56 years since you, or close to 56
Yes.
years, this summer, since you two arrived and you accepted this and you indicated you're going to stay here as long as necessary. It's been 56 years. As you look at the time that you've spent here, has it been spent well? Has it been spent well?
It was as well as I could have done. It was as well as those of us committed to change could have done at the time. Martin Luther Jr. came to a meeting one day and says, hey, I don't know who said this, but I'm claiming it as mine now. We ain't what we want to be. We ain't what we ought to be. We ain't what we're going to be, but thank God we ain't what we were as a people. Yes, we didn't accomplish everything that we wanted. We didn't, and we are not going to accomplish everything that we should. My time, energy, and resources were well spent, and I knew when I came here and accepted the job that I would be like a Moses. I could only take the people with me so far, and it would be the next generation that would take it, and the next, and the next. But we were going to move. We were not going to leave. Yes, it was worth it. It reminds me, I think of the University of Oklahoma, I think of the students mostly. If anyone should ever write, it's a song, if anyone should ever write my life story for whatever reason there may be, students would be in my life with all my fame and glory. They were the best things that happened to me. The OU students were the best things that happened to me. It dawned on me one day, why should I go to the East Coast, West Coast, back to the Midwest to look for students? And I had the best students that I could have wanted here. Didn't need a fancy name, just needed the people. Yes, it was worthwhile.
Oh, I love it. I can tell you from our perspective, it's more than worthwhile, and it's an indelible change. And speaking of change, while unlike you, I didn't know Martin Luther King Jr. I do love one of the quotes about the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And when I have taught at the law school, I've thought a lot about the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and how long it was until that actually became the real law of the land, really not being fully realized until 64 and then the Civil Rights Act of 91. As you sit here today, one of the statistics I'm proud of with the university for sure is I talk about this year's record freshman class, and we talk about 39% of that record freshman class identify from historically disadvantaged groups. And 25% of those in this record freshman class, like you, are the first in the history of their families to go to college. All that being said, we know how much racial strife there is in the country right now, what the social divide is. As you sit here and think about it, has the arc bent towards justice?
Of course.
And how far have we come and how far do we have to go?
You should have asked my mother. You should have asked her grandparents and their grandparents. And they would say, of course you've come far. Those whose ancestors were enslaved would look at us and they would say, oh my goodness. My mother, for example, when she moved to Norman to live with us until she passed away, she said, never did I ever think that I would live in a community like this. She attended a white church, and they called her sister, and she had her seat. And the Bible study people would come to her house to study. And my mother said, George, honestly, I thought we would be in a black community and we'd be doing well. She says, no, this is where we should be. Progress is relative. If I've learned anything of importance about the civil rights movement, it was that we learned that you need to compromise. You need to accept things less than what you think you want, but don't give up. Don't take your eyes off the proud and don't stop striving for the top. But don't ever say nothing has changed. If nothing has not changed, then I shouldn't be sitting here. You should be having this interview with a white professor talking about the civil rights movement. No, I of course, more has to happen. My family's changed, doggone it. And that's something else my mother looks at. We've got a picture of several generations of us, and 3/4 of my grandchildren are biracial, actually multiracial. And good gracious, my mother said, George, I knew about living with them, but in our house? She loved those babies. And my mother said she loved all babies, and she passed that on to me. You know, I was thinking about this. That question is a wonderful question. Sometimes those of us who think in a movement that we're doing things that are always helpful, words matter. Words matter deeply. And I'm wrestling now with myself to deal with a word, non-white. That's very good. But people of color, the last time I looked, white is a color. Mm-hmm. And when I use that word, I have to check myself and say, maybe it's a divisive if a white person is listening to me to say people of color. The word itself then separates us. I don't want to separate. I look at my grandchildren, and one of them said, I'm a African. What's he going to do? He accepts people as they are. We did it right, Barbara and I.
Well, there's no question you and Barbara are doing it right. It's interesting. And I've told you this story before, but I want to make sure the listeners hear this. About 7 years ago, my son Joseph, my oldest, who is now a freshman at OU, came home from school, came home from 7th grade, and he said, we had a guest speaker I didn't know about today. He came in, and Dad, I met a hero. And, of course, I perked up, and I listened to it. And he didn't generally talk about any guest speakers that came to the class. And he began to talk about this hero. And I knew after the first 2 sentences it was you, Dr. George Henderson. But I let him play it out. And I wanted to hear what he had heard from you. And not just that you were a hero, but your story, the story of civil rights in the United States, the story of you coming to Oklahoma. And I loved listening to him. And so, you sit here, there's more to come. But as you look back, you retired from OU in 2006.
Yeah, but Barbara won't let me use the word retired.
That's right.
She says, liar, liar, if you had hair, it would be on fire. I'm still doing things.
But you continue to teach, and you've continued to be a fabric of the community. What do you hope people think of when they think of you and your legacy?
Oh, gosh. I want them to think that I gave because I loved. I loved the students, first and foremost, and then my colleagues, secondly. We are family, and family to me means extended, and not just in words, but in action and in relationships. I want them to say that he was a pioneer who needed people to help him to be a pioneer. I need it as much as I need breath, as much as I need air and water. I needed the students who were not black to accept me and to say, we too are your children, and they are. Say about me what you will, but always remember that I have accomplished nothing of significance without my students. They taught me. They taught me to accept difference and not just talk about difference. They asked me tough questions, and they challenged each other. So think about me as someone who's blessed. Blessed to have a creator who would send him to a place and tell him in many ways, don't worry about the money, do your job, do the work, as people say today. I got a chance to meet a lot of good people like you. And like, oh gosh, do I remember Joseph? Do I remember your son? He said, and he was listening and he asked a question, and we connected. We connected as I try to connect with all students. You and me, same. But I tell them, as I am now, you may become, as you are, I once was. And in between that transition, I did many things that were wrong before I knew better. And I tried never to do the same bad things over. So I was very creative. I did a lot of bad things. But my journey was like students holding my hand and saying, we too can do this together. What can I say? People, I think of the dozen or so job offers that I turned down to stay here, 4 of them college presidencies. And Barbara would always ask me in an interview, will you still be able to teach? Every time was the answer no, because I was going to places that needed me hands-on, full-time, and not, she says, now do you think you'll enjoy not teaching? I can do the administrative things. But I love teaching. I exist outside of the classroom. I'm alive in it. So I turned those jobs down. As far as going to another university, the students, truth be told, when I was going to leave and Barbara said no, I told the administration that I was going to leave so they could recruit another black professor. And somehow the students, the grapevine is very efficient. They had heard 4 hours after I had told the president, George Lynn Cross, that I was going to leave. And there were 5 students outside of my office, in the sociology office, and they were crying, and they said, we heard that you're leaving. And one of them asked the question, don't you like us? God, yes, I like them. I love them. And then she asked, well, then why are you leaving? I didn't have a good answer. For another job, for another position? I didn't come here for that. I came to teach. So yeah, they taught me a lot. They taught me that people first. Could I share another story?
Please.
The last serious job offer that I participated in was the University of Minnesota. Senior vice president in terms of community athletics and you name it, a whole lot of other things. And I was the first person to be interviewed, and the committee said, we want you, Dr. Henderson. I said, but you're interviewing 3 others. They said, we know, but we want you. We've already decided. After the interview, they called and they said, would you come? Barbara and I had the conversation, and we talked to our kids, and we said, there's a possibility that I will accept a job at the University of Minnesota. The 7 of them got together, and then they said, Dad, let's have a family meeting. You and Mom can go to Minnesota, but we're staying here in this house and you can come visit us. Say, hey, did we do it? Did we accomplish something? Our kids found friends here, lifelong friends here, in a place that supposedly we shouldn't like. I went back and the president couldn't understand. He said, why would you want to stay at in that small school and when you can come to the prestigious Big Ten? And on and on and on. And after listening to the sales talk, I just asked him a question. I said, if the University of Oklahoma is so bad, why are you recruiting me? Nobody talks that way about my university.
That's right.
So, yeah. I can't think of the university without thinking about people. It's an abstraction otherwise. I could do my teaching elsewhere, but not the way that I want to do it. I can do my research anywhere. I can do my community service anywhere, but I need students. And I needed these students. God, I needed these students. And fortunately, they needed me.
I think that's...
we needed each other. So what did we do together? We decided that we would create a family. And it wasn't just in in words. We did that. I'm getting now grandchildren of students that I taught.
Isn't that amazing?
And they say that my grandma or grandpa says that I better stop by and say hi to you.
Well, for good reason. You know, it's interesting. Today I had a student come by today, and they were talking about they had an opportunity to go somewhere else. And their comment, which I think is fascinating, the same day that we're having this conversation, and they said, but I feel like my family's here. And it's a student that actually is from pretty far away. And we have the same conversations with the international students, the Davis World Scholars, and students who are local. And to me, it's that feeling of belonging, of attachment, of connection that everybody craves. And I love the fact that your own 7 kids told you and Barbara, this is our home, this is our family, we're staying here. And and clearly you understand this, but think of all of the lives you've touched, where because of you, those students, all students, but certainly black students, felt like they belonged, like they have a family here. And I hope you know how fundamentally important that is in the lives of so many people, and you've certainly given more than you've taken.
But think about it this way, Joe. All of those lives touch me too, and a piece of them are embedded in my heart, in my soul. So we're bound together forever. It's always 2 ways. It works best that way. When my mother told me I love you, as a little boy trying to be a man, I really didn't respond. She says, George, I love you. Do you love me? Of course I did. And I finally got up enough courage when I came to the University of Oklahoma to tell my students I love you. And that means that we help one another, that we appreciate one another. We'll be our foremost cheerleaders and our best critics. We'll get it right. And if we don't get it right, it won't be because we didn't try. So yeah, it works. It always worked both ways.
And in a lot of ways, I think these 2 parts of the conversation connect. When you think about, to me, the highest state of legacy is the fact that part of you, the good part, and we all have good and bad parts, and I love that you recognize that. But to me, the greatest thing about legacy, the greatest legacy that can exist, is that part of you is in someone else, right? Part of you, part of what you have, the good that we have, and the good that you have, is transmitted in those that came after you, your students.
Yes. And
their children. So I think your legacy, I know your legacy is a remarkable one. I know it lives inside of so many people. And I can tell you that I'm one of them. I've been here since I was here as a student in the 80s, and I came back in 94 to work here. And from the moment I arrived, both as a student and in this role, and the roles that I've had since November of 94, I always think about you and the way you've approached things and the impact you have. And I love the fact that we're sitting here today. You've been here for 56 years. Yeah. I've been at OU now for, I think, 28. And I love your story about you and your service and you talking to the Arab individual and you saying, you and me, same. And the truth of the matter is that here we sit today, absolutely, a black man and an Arab man.
Yes, same,
right? Same. And thank you for everything that you've given us and everything you are giving us, and nothing but love for you and Barbara.
It's mutual. It will always be.
Well, and your legacy is going to live on forever. Thank you so much, Dr. Henderson. I want to thank Dr. George Henderson for joining the show. I hope you can see why he's one of the heroes in my life and a true icon of the University of Oklahoma community. I hope that many of you watching or listening today are inspired by the life of and the story of Dr. Henderson, and that all of us hope to make an impact as profound as his and live up to the OU mantra of changing lives. Thank you all for listening to today's episode. I look forward to our next conversation with the President.